All right, welcome everyone. Good to have y'all here. We're waiting on at least one more speaker and potentially two or three more, depending. We'll see. Yeah, welcome everyone to this weekly Twitter space where we discuss the hottest topics in Web3 from a research-based perspective. Today we'll be talking about zero knowledge proofs and different ZK rollups. And we'll talk a bit about the zkSync airdrop. So before we get started, I'll introduce MetricsDAO, myself, and then our guest. So the host of our space is MetricsDAO. MetricsDAO is a community of Web3 data analysts where you can learn, earn, and connect. So be sure to follow if you want to find out more. Now, these spaces are organized and moderated by me, Helix, and I focus on bringing out useful insights drawn from data and research. By working with top analysts, researchers, and experts, we decipher numbers and stories to help you arrive at measured perspectives. So if you value well-founded takes and are keen on taking a data-driven approach, be sure to follow me. With these spaces and more, we're bringing clarity to complexity, one conversation at a time. So now for our speakers, we got Tom Wan from 21 Shares, Jack Inabinet, I think hope I'm saying it right, from Bankless, and Louis Wang from Six Degree Lab. We're also waiting for Oscar Mott from Nansen, who'll be coming later probably, and potentially Westy and Matt from Blockworks Research. So, gentlemen, thank you for being here. Good to have y'all. Please tell us a bit more about yourself, your work in general, and also what you investigated specifically on today's topic. Tom, feel free to take it off, maybe.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks for having me. And I'm Tom. I'm from 21 Shares. A little bit about our company. So 21 Shares is the largest crypto ETP issuer in the world right now. So what is a crypto ETP? You can think, and it's really similar to an ETF. And interestingly, before BlackRock filed a Bitcoin ETF, we also filed like several times a spot Bitcoin ETF as well. So that's what our companies do. We offer easier crypto access to everyone, not only the crypto native side, but also the traditional side. And I'm a research analyst at 21 Shares. I mainly do a lot of on-chain analytics. We also have a zkEVM dashboards analyzing both Polygon zkEVM and zkSync error as well. And that's my background. And pass it to you, Jack.
Yeah, hey, how's it going, everyone? Very happy to be here. Jack Nabonnet. It was close. Usually, no one gets it right on the first time, so don't beat yourself up. But yeah, analyst at Bankless. So I enjoy kind of writing about whatever is kind of the cool, trendy, hot topic in the crypto space. Funny enough, before coming into this, I recently did a little piece on zero knowledge rollups versus optimistic rollups and some of the potential exploit vectors with fault proofs and how zero knowledge rollups are actually trying to remedy that and why they remedy that. So I kind of came prepared in. I was prepared for this discussion accidentally. And then also too at Bankless, we do some focus with airdrops and airdrop guides. So plugged into the airdrop landscape for sure. And zkSync is definitely a very interesting L2 for multiple reasons as an airdrop, and would definitely be excited to get into that a little bit later. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, you're definitely hitting all the markers that we're going to be talking about today. Uh, I wanted to touch on like the differences between the optimistic rollups and ZK rollups. So we're going to get to that. And definitely, as a lot of people are usually excited and curious about airdrops, we'll be getting into that as well. Louis, uh, yeah, tell us more about yourself, please.
Hey everyone, very excited to be here. I'm Louis from Six Degree Lab. And shall I introduce a bit about Six Degree? Six Degree is an on-chain data analysis team we provide data as a service. Previously, we have worked with 20 plus clients like Lens Protocol, Paraswap, Rabbit Hole, Y Combinator, and many others. Yeah, I'm really excited to join the panel today.
Awesome. Yeah, I checked out two of your dashboards. They were really informative and got some questions about them coming later. Thanks for those introductions, guys. I think we have a very nice panel together today. Definitely interested and excited to find out what you guys have been investigating, what you guys have been looking at, what insights you've been having, and also, sometimes there are still remaining questions, and we can take a stab at them together. Some people might know that others don't, stuff like that. We can do a bit of knowledge exchange. Yeah, so let's get it started. Let's start very general, very wide, very high level with some basic introductions about what ZK zero knowledge is, zero knowledge proofs. Can anyone give me a light and not too technical explanation?
I can start first. So a zero knowledge proof, as its names go, is trying to prove something, right? And the coolest part is when a person is trying to prove an information, right? It does not need to reveal the underlying info at all to the verifier. And I think that's the power of zero knowledge proof at a very high level, because as you can hear that it is obviously preserving the privacy for the prover, right? You don't need to review any information. But a quick disclaimer here is that it's not all rollups, for example, even though they're leveraging zero knowledge proofs, right? But they don't need to enable that feature for enabling privacy preserving for the layer 2 network. You can just use the technology, but not necessarily enable that privacy preserving feature. So that's something we need to bear in mind, I think.
That's great to know, because that's often like one of the first things you hear that gets talked about as one of the main benefits, right? It's better for privacy and also for scaling, but definitely that privacy part. So that's optional, you're saying. Okay. And so like a question I have and I had while researching this is like, okay, to ZK, you're enabled to get proof that something um, you're able to prove something without giving away the information of what it is. But that seems very much like an oxymoron. Like it seems mutually exclusive, if you know what I mean. How do they overcome this dilemma? Also, like, if maybe my question is already going too far in the technical realm. Um,
Oh, I mean, I guess what I'll say on that, like, I'm definitely not like a super tech guy, right? But like my understanding is like, I mean, it's very extremely cryptographically complex process, and it's you basically can reveal your information and prove that you're able to execute on something or that you have something without kind of revealing what that is. So like I could go to a bank and say get a loan for my home, but the bank wouldn't need to know how much is in my balance, just that I have the balance to be able to collateralize that kind of loan. So, I mean, definitely like a very high level cryptographic complex, but I feel like, or concept, but I feel like one thing, I mean, especially in this context, that's worth noting is like, so we have like zero knowledge proofs, right? And those are used in the roll up process, right? But like you can use zero knowledge proofs for things other than roll ups. So like zero knowledge tech is more than just roll ups, but roll ups is kind of one of the applications where those they're being perfected and where they're being scaled and where they're really being put to the test and like actually meeting users and seeing the demand. So from that kind of front, like there's a wide variety of applications for zero knowledge technology beyond just rollups. So it's also important to kind of keep that context in mind.
Love it. What a great explanation. Thank you for that. Yeah, and that's perfect. We don't want to get too far in too deep in the weeds, let's say. Um, so great explanation and a good nuance that today we're just talking about a very small portion, let's say, of the possible applications of zero knowledge or zero knowledge proofs. Another question that comes to mind when you talk about this stuff in general, we've seen like a proliferation in layer twos, Arbitrum, Optimism. Those are the big two ones. We got a bunch more. Most of them are what they call optimistic rollups. So it seems like this is a different type of technology. What's the difference between optimistic rollups and zk rollups, and what are the different benefits?
Yeah, so I guess I can take that. So, like, one of the primary benefits between an optimistic and a ZK rollup is that with an optimistic rollup, you're optimistically assuming that the transactions are correct, right? So, like, there's an off chain computation that goes on, and the operator is publishing a summary of these transactions onto the blockchain, but there's no way to actually verify that these are correct. And the way that, or I guess there is a way, but you don't verify that the transactions are correct when they're posted. And this is done so that you're able to reduce and lower these transaction fees and only post like partial data, right? Because when you reduce the amount of data that you're using to make transactions on Ethereum, you're reducing your gas costs and you're providing scalability, right? If an optimistic rollup was posting all of the transactions, you'd have a similar cost to what it would take to transact on Ethereum L1. So they have to take shortcuts to be able to provide that fast and cost efficient experience. And so what you do to prove that there is an incorrect transaction is what's called like a fraud proof challenge. And once again, like cryptographically complex, but basically what happens is an actor initiates this challenge within the challenge period. So most optimistic rollups both are about 7 days, I believe. I think Optimism and Arbitrum are both there, and that time frame is long enough that theoretically, if I can publish that fraud proof and actually prove that these transactions are incorrect. However, that assumption is based on the fact that there is somebody out there who's going to actually make that fraud proof. And then it also depends on that person who's making the fraud proof actually being able to post the fraud proof onto Ethereum L1, right? And although like 7 days does seem like a long time, right? So like imagine you're an attacker and you have made some series of malicious transactions in an optimistic rollup. Now you have 7 days where you kind of have to defend and lock down this rollup, and you cannot allow anyone to post this fraud proof, right? And what that would mean is that you're actually like DDoSing the entire L1 to prevent the posting of these fraud proofs, right? And does that seem like it's unlikely? Yes. Why? Because gas is going to exponentially increase over the course of this attack. And like hypothetically, I think you'd burn half of the ETH supply in 30 minutes post this attack. But you can have collusion on the validator level that suppresses the fraud proof. And so what the ZK rollup does is it actually proves that all of the transactions are valid through the zero knowledge proof, then posts that to the Ethereum L1's call data currently. And so when that is read, you're guaranteed that all of those transactions are correct. And so in that way, the optimistic rollup relies on Ethereum for you to be able to post and go and say, hey, these transactions are incorrect, versus a zero knowledge rollup, which always guarantees you that the transactions are correct. So that's kind of like the high level difference between how those two are working. definitely kind of rambled on there, so I'll pass it on to somebody else for some.
No, Jack, not at all. That was actually perfect. I can really tell that you did quite some research on this. I think you laid it out perfectly. So we talked about, okay, what zk proofs are, what optimistic rollups are, how they differ from each other. Um, so, okay, I think we got that clear. So we can start getting a bit more in depth about like different specific protocols. I think you guys investigated a couple of different ones. Uh, if I'm correct, I'm pretty sure I am. You've looked at zkSync, but correct me if I'm wrong. zkSync and between like on zkSync, there's a difference between zkSync Era and zkSync Lite. I believe Jack also looked at Starknet, but it could be wrong on that. And Tom also looked at Polygon, which to me was surprising because Polygon's been around for a long while. I I thought ZK rollups were a new thing. Maybe we can get into that as well. Yeah, heck, let's start there. Like Tom, I believe you looked at zkSync Era and Polygon zkEVM and compared them. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a dashboard comparing side by side. So if anyone is on the computer right now, feel free to check it out on Dune. So the key differences in terms of not dig into the data yet. So in terms of the technical difference, a really key differentiation is zkSync in terms of the EVM compatibility. zkSync is more on the compatibility level, and Polygon zkEVM is more on the EVM equivalent level. So it's more similar to Ethereum for Polygon. However, that doesn't mean it's good or bad, right? Because there's certainly some trade-off if you want to be more EVM or Ethereum equivalent. So Vitalik actually released a blog post on 4 types of zkEVM. And 4 types is the first one is the most Ethereum equivalent. So it's the first type. And the second type is called EVM equivalent, which is similar to what Polygon zkEVM is doing, or Scroll, which is also another zkEVM. And type 3 is regarding the EVM compatible, which is similar to zkSync Era. The reason behind that, the difference between Polygon zkEVM and zkSync Era is zkSync Era doesn't allow a direct copy and paste in terms of the code. For example, you want to launch a Uniswap on zkSync Era and Polygon proof of stake. Polygon zkEVM. You can just dump the code directly to Polygon zkEVM, but you can't dump directly on zkSync Era. Maybe you can, but not entirely 100%, because one differentiation of zkSync Era is they have a compiler of the Solidity code. For example, if you want to write in Solidity, they actually has a compiler called LLKM, meaning that you aren't directly writing your app in Solidity. So even though you write in Solidity, but actually underlying it, there is a compiler so that it can help you launch your application on zkSync Era. And therefore, it is only EVM compatible, but not EVM equivalent. And the last bit is type 4, which is a really high-level code compatibility, which is similar to what Starknet is doing. So Starknet is using a zk Stark proof, and one differentiation is, or one key technology they're using is using Cairo to enable the transition from Solidity code to enabling them to launch on Starknet. So that's the key differentiation here, to lay out the fundamentals, what are the key differences and whatnot. And in terms of the data, which is super exciting, and zkSync Era actually have a much larger TVL in terms of the breach. So zkSync Era currently has around 585 million worth of crypto has deposited through the zkSync Era breach. And whereas Polygon zkEVM, which only has around 42 million deposited to that bridge. And in terms of number of depositors, there are around almost 1 million depositors. Depositors meaning that a unique addresses, although we can't differentiate if that is really an user or not, because you can't really tell, right? But there is around 1 million unique addresses deposited to zkSync Era, whereas Polygon only got around 45K. So you can see the numbers is a huge difference, right? zkSync Era TVL almost got 10x than Polygon zkEVM, right? So one plausible reason is because people are speculating the airdrop on zkSync Era, right? Because there is no token yet, and people have been farming a lot on building or bridging their assets towards zkSync Era and try out different application. And whereas Polygon, on the other hand, they already have an existing token called Matic, right? And therefore, at its very beginning, people aren't paying attention to Polygon zkEVM, right? Because there isn't a lot of applications there compared to like already developed layer 2 like Optimism or Arbitrum, and therefore they haven't got a lot of traction at the very beginning. But actually, Sandeep, the founder of Polygon, actually hinted that Polygon zkEVM could potentially also launch an airdrop as well. So stay tuned, guys. And after that tweet goes out, the TVL of Polygon zkEVM skyrocketed quite a lot. Actually, I think around threefold since that tweet got out. So that's some background in terms of data and some technological difference of two different zk rollups here.
Awesome. I'm hearing lots of interesting things. So a couple things I didn't know yet. There are actually different levels to the compatibility and composability of different protocols. And if I understood correctly, zkSync is a lot more compatible with Ethereum, and Polygon, it still is, but it's one extra step removed, let's say, and it has implications. Is that correct?
Sorry, sorry. So zkEVM for Polygon is more compatible. It's more similar to the environment of Ethereum, and zkSync Era is more away. But there is a trade-off, right? If you're more similar to Ethereum, your performance level could be lower because Ethereum on its origination is not very zk friendly, and therefore you need to make some trade-off. The more you are similar to Ethereum, the performance could be lower as well, and therefore Starknet could be a more highly performant L2 than the other zkEVMs.
Interesting. Okay, so it's actually exactly the other way around from what I said, and it has implications because there are trade-offs. Because Ethereum is not so suitable in some ways as could be. Interesting. Okay, great. Okay, and then you also alluded already to like the airdrop and where we've seen differences. Polygon already has a token, so the airdrop hunters are maybe thinking it's not so interesting in the first place, but they said they might have some other things in store. Okay, great. You also mentioned Starknet. Jack, I believe you took a closer look at them as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I haven't really taken a close look at Starknet. It's definitely one of the ecosystems I follow, and we kind of follow in Bankless. But yeah, so Starknet, like Tom was saying, is written on Cairo or using Cairo, which is a different language than Solidity. And what it allows for them to do is like they can custom tailor their language to overcome the barriers and the obstacles that their developers have as they're going along and they're building these apps, right? So it gives them a greater degree of flexibility. That's why we've seen Starknet be able to ship features like account abstraction. And so it allows them to develop at a faster pace and progress at a faster pace compared to lots of L2s, but at the same time, by having developers need to understand a new coding language, you're kind of creating this moat around your ecosystem. And so for Starknet, one of the interesting things to note is that it's a very like gaming heavy platform. I mean, yes, they will have a token. I know their airdrop announcements and some of the past language that they've released hasn't made it seem like they'd be allocating a ton of tokens to early users. If any at all, it seems like it might primarily just be going towards gas incentives, but obviously these token structures are flexible to change. But Starknet is a gaming chain, and as a gaming chain, there's not a lot of TVL that's going to be flowing into it. So that's part of the reason why when you look at like zkSync Era versus Polygon zkEVM rollup versus Starknet, that's why Starknet is going to be that lowest TVL rollup. But I think it is a really cool experiment in trying to push the cutting edge of zk technology. And I think that they're making some interesting trade-offs. And so it's certainly one of those ecosystems that you want to keep in mind as kind of like a contrarian play to what the rest of the group is doing.
Okay, the dark horse, let's say, in the race. Interesting. So it sounds a bit like, okay, they're building this mode. It sounds like a bit like an all or nothing play. Either it works in their favor and it could be, they could explode and then they have this mode, which is great, or it could actually prevent them from catching enough momentum. Is that a bit of a good analysis?
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, there's totally a world in which, and I mean, especially with something like gaming too, like we are quite legitimately one good game away from mass adoption, right? And especially on something like Starknet, where you have a lot of those features like account abstraction, right? So if that hit game comes on Starknet, like there's a chance that this could become the most valuable L2, right? But the problem is that hit game has to come off of Starknet, and if that hit and the next thing continually does not come off of Starknet and is coming off of Solidity written platforms and ETH compatible or EVM compatible or whatever acronym you want to use, right? Whatever one of those 4 degrees, they're going to have a lot more difficulty coming into Starknet. So Starknet's not going to be able to get developers or talent from outside of the ecosystem. It's really going to have to be like a self-made Spark.
Interesting. Okay, I got you. Okay, interesting strategy on their part. So until now, the smallest TVL you mentioned. Back to zkSync, which I think, if I'm right, could be wrong. I think it's the biggest TVL up until now from the zk rollup protocols. Louis, you also, we hadn't touched on this yet, but you also looked at zkSync, and I believe you specifically looked at the difference between zkSync Era and zkSync Lite. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. Basically, zkSync is a layer 2 scaling solution designed to scale Ethereum with the use of zk rollup technology. Actually, there are 2 mainnets of zkSync. The first is Lite, which is launched back to 2020. Lite allows basic transfers, swaps, and NFTs functions, but no smart contracts. And recently, zkSync has launched Era, which is known as zkSync 2.0. It supports generalized EVM compatibility for the Ethereum blockchain. And this means that both dApps deployed on Ethereum can be deployed on zkSync Era. As Tom mentioned before, zkSync is EVM compatible. It is not EVM equivalent, which means what we cannot do on Ethereum is expected to be done on zkSync. For example, account abstraction, it is very important to the mass adoption. zkSync is able to own its own native account abstraction, while on Ethereum mainnet, we had to find an alternative way like ERP-4337 to achieve that. And yeah.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, that's all good.
Okay, and I'm wondering, okay, what are then the implications of this? So zk Lite doesn't, it has not the option of using smart contracts. zk Era does. What extra benefits does this bring?
I think this brings the biggest difference as zkSync Era is EVM compatible. Most dApps can migrate from Ethereum to zkSync easily, so it brings lots of developers and users from Ethereum mainnet. And the smart contract on zkSync can be written both in Solidity and its own native language, which is called Sync, if my memory serves.
Yes, I also believe that. I read about that. Zinc, as in the mineral. Okay, great. Okay, I got you. So zkSync Era, their 2.0 version that will allow basically to let developers build, bring dApps to the ecosystem and have a more lively, active, flourishing ecosystem where things are going on, where you can do different things. Okay, great, awesome. Okay, now let's get a bit more into the data and the numbers you guys have looked at, different types of metrics. One thing I noticed, for example, Louis, sticking with the era versus light thing, I saw light obviously had a lot of activity earlier on, like a couple years back. That's been slowly diminishing. And now, like in more recent, I'm not sure, correct me if I'm wrong, couple last weeks, it's absolutely exploding in activity, much more than activity on light. Is that right? And can you tell us a bit more about the data you looked at, the metrics?
Yeah, as mentioned, zkSync Lite does not support smart contracts, which means there actually are not many dApps you can interact with on zkSync Lite. Although it supports some basic swaps, transfers, and it supports Gitcoin donation. It's actually, we can say it's boring to exploring on Lite, but with the zkSync Era emerging, we can see there are lots of bridge, capital bridge from Ethereum mainnet to the zkSync Era, and since the Era launched, like 80% of the fund capital are bridged to the zk Era, and while the other 20% are transferred to Lite. And in terms of on-chain activities, we can see in 3 months there are more than 2.4 million unique addresses have made over 42.4 million transactions. And if we take a close look at the rentation of the zkSync Era, we can see like 73% of the users have keep interacting with zkSync Era for over 60 days, and if we count their zkSync Era age, we have 1.16 billion users with over 2 months. So basically, zkSync, although zkSync Era is on its very early stage, there are many users focus on the zkSync interact actively on Era.
Gotcha. Very interesting. Okay, so it all makes a lot of sense with what you said earlier, because of the limitations of CK Lite, and there's not that much you can do with it. It's a bit boring, like you said. It makes sense that users, one, are not gonna stick around a long time, and two, with time now that our space is growing and evolving, people tend to go for newer things. So they start shifting away from light. And at the same time, because there's a lot more to do on the 2.0 on zkSync era, it makes sense that you see a lot more activity there, but also a lot better retention. Um, so that's cool that the data actually supports that. Um, you mentioned a lot of different metrics and numbers. The one I want to zero in on, because I was looking at your dashboard and the one from Tom, and I was like trying to make a comparison, but I'm probably wrong here, but I want to check something. So I was looking at your dashboard, Louis. It says 1.2 billion of balance amount in US dollars. Um, Whereas the dashboard from Tom for zkSync states a TVL of $587 million. So obviously that's a big difference. I was like looking for the TVL on Louis' dashboard. I probably didn't find it. These are different numbers, right? What's balance amount exactly?
Yeah, I can explain a bit about that number, how we get it. This number is actually
Uh-huh.
from our June dashboard. It is about the bridge information between Ethereum mainnet and zkSync. How we get this number? We take deposit amount as inflow and withdraw amount as outflow. Inflow minus outflow is the balance. It is not the TVL, so we call it balance. And for the simplicity, we only considered zkSync official bridge, which means it does not include any third-party bridges like Arbiter or Layer Zero, and it doesn't include bridge from other Layer 2 blockchains like Arbitrum or Optimism. And also, it is the sum of zkSync and zkLite, and it is a sum of ETH value and or ERC20 tokens value. So that is probably why we see it very different from what Tom has got. If we take a look at layer 2 bit data, it shows the TVL of zkSync era is about $580 million, which is the very number that Tom has got. But if we take a look at DeFi Llama, it shows $165 million. So there's a huge difference between every single data website or dashboard you see. It is basically because they take different approaches. Let's back to if we want to think about the difference between layer 2 bit and the DeFi Llama. Basically, it is that layer 2 bit data is about the bridge data, which means how much capital has bridged to the zkSync. And if we take a look at DeFi Llama, it is the sum of all the dApps that DeFi Llama has listed that the capital which the capital has been locked. So layer 2 bit is more about the fund that bridge to the zkSync wallets, which means they may not be used in any dApps. They has just been transferred from Ethereum to or any other blockchain to zkSync. But the DeFi Llama means all the capital locked in the dApps they have listed. And back to the dashboard, our dashboard. the difference between our data and Tom's data. That is because we have different approaches and then we have different definition of that. Tom has calculated the zkSync errors, TV error. We have calculated the balance of both error and light. I don't know if it makes sense.
And yeah, I'm on mute. Yeah, it makes total sense. And Jack, definitely feel free to break in here if you
Nope,
want.
sorry.
Could be your it's all good. It's all good. Louis, it makes total sense. And actually, I wanted to ask that question because I think, and your explanation does a great job of that. It really illustrates really well that when dealing data is never just data, or like a metric is never just a metric. It's very important. Like, okay, where does the data come from? How do you arrive at that specific number? Like, or even like what's included or excluded from the number? Are the layer twos included or not? Stuff like that. And I think your answer does a great job of illustrating that process, right? That if when an analyst is building a dashboard, he has to ask himself all these questions and make choices. And it also, to the listener, I think it gives a perspective of how important it is that you look very closely at the numbers of a dashboard, but also everything that's behind it. How did they arrive at that number? So thank you for that great explanation. I just want to throw an open question out there to any of the speakers for the research you did. What other? Because we talked now about TVL. We talked a bit about retention rates. What other numbers, metrics have you guys looked at? Especially, let's stick with the ones that surprised you most or that you found most interesting. What are like some good takeaways and insights here?
I can shed some light here. I got some really interesting data when I was researching about zkSync error and Polygon, right? So it's weird, right? In terms of just the fundamentals, right? Polygon should have at least a similar TVL with zkSync error. They launch on a similar date. They have similar application, or even Polygon has a more familiar brand name than most of the crypto native users, right? So why do zkSync error has such much more depositors and TVL than Polygon, right? So the first reason we have seen that it is because highly speculative because of potential farming for airdrop, right? And this is just speculation, right? We can't prove that unless we look into the data. And it's really impressive. I always found it really fascinating how we can leverage on-chain data to be like a detective to find the supportive claim of your assumption. For example, when we see the TVL of zkSync error is much higher than Polygon zkEVM, right? So we can make an assumption of there is potential farming activities, right? And therefore, when we look deeper into the data, right, we look at the wallet, wallet by wallet, we can see that compared to the depositors of zkSync error and Polygon zkEVM, there is much more new wallets on zkSync error than zkEVM. So for example, 61% of the depositors into zkSync error is actually new wallets, which means that it created after the launch of zkSync error. It doesn't mean it is 100% it is a simple wallet. It doesn't mean that, but it is highly probable that it is one of the flag that you can use it as a metric to identify potential simple wallets. And 61%, it doesn't seem like a lot, but when you look at Polygon zkEVM, it only has around 31%. So comparatively, you can see the huge differences here. And when we look at the activities on chain as well, 77% of the depositors on zkSync error hasn't done any DEX trade or NFT trades. They only do like simple transfer, and 9% of them did DEX and NFC trade, and 9.5% did only DEX trade. So you can see a huge amount of them haven't tried DEX trading or NFC trading. And whereas, for example, Polygon zkEVM, only 41% haven't done DEX trading and NFC trading. And similarly, I think a really interesting analysis here as well is when we look at the depositors, how many of them is a Arbitrum or Optimism user, right? You can assume that if a user want to try out a zkSync error, for example, they should probably have tried out Arbitrum or Optimism as well, right? Because if you haven't tried out Arbitrum or Optimism, you might not have experienced using like more complex protocol like a CK rollup, right? So that's one of the assumption here. And then what we found out is over 35% of them, of the zkSync error depositors, haven't tried out both Arbitrum and Optimism. However, on Polygon zkEVM, only 12% of them haven't tried both LT out. So according to these three key areas of analytics, you can see that potentially zkSync error has much more civil wallets than Polygon zkEVM, and therefore the TVL and number of depositors are much higher than Polygon zkEVM. But bear in mind that there are obviously some caveat because we can't identify which entities are behind each of these wallets. Some people might be like opening a new wallet just for farming airdrop. That makes sense, right? That's something I would do as well to not harm my original wallet, right? But if there is a huge percentage of them are new wallets, that is something might be a red flag here. So that's an interesting finding I would share.
Very interesting. Like you said earlier, like a detective almost, you look at basically like the behavior of these wallets and then compare them between these protocols and also do some like logical thinking of like, does this make sense? And like, if I compare these two, should I be seeing this different that I'm seeing this difference that I am seeing? Um, Okay, very interesting. So it does seem like, so your conclusion is basically, okay, it seems like people are hunting for airdrops. And that's definitely the sentiment that I got from my research as well. There are lots of dashboards, same as layer zero, a couple weeks back. Suddenly I saw like an explosion of dashboards on that protocol, and also specifically about airdrop farming, and you could like look up your address and there's like ranking stuff like that. So a question about that ranking I have. I believe Louis, you did that dashboard where you can, yeah, the airdrop simulation ranking. Um, and it says we simulated user rankings by a similar ranking algorithm as Arbitrum, which is also a layer 2 blockchain. So how fair or reliable is it to make the assumption that it will be similar to Arbitrum? Or is it just kind of like, yeah, like it's the closest thing we've got, so we might as well go with that? What's the situation?
Yeah, you're right. They are very similar. They are in the same section. They are all layer 2 protocols. Although one is optimistic rollup and the other is zk rollup. But basically, they are all layer 2 rollup solutions. And for Arbitrum, they have 2 minutes as well. They have Arbitrum Nova, Arbitrum One, and one is launched first and the other followed. This is very similar to zkSync. Lite was launched back in 2020, and Era is launched in March this year. So we include all the airdrop rules that Arbitrum has, and we apply that to zkSync. So, and we do that the simulation. We consider the both the bridge data and the on-chain activities as well. We consider the deposit transaction number and the number of deposit transactions and the duration of the usage, and we also consider the amount of the capital they have breached or they have used on the zkSync, and we also take their orientation, their active using months, using days as a parameter.
Awesome, love it. Okay, so I understand. Obviously you cannot know how zkSync will decide to reward activity, or maybe you can if they make it public, but since that's not the case, you go through like this logical process of doing a comparison. Okay, it's actually very similar in lots of regards to Arbitrum. Okay, let's take that as a proxy, and then at least we have an educated guess on what we can expect if there will be an airdrop. Great approach, very, very interesting. All right. Yeah, okay. I think we covered a lot of the ground that we wanted to cover.
Could I add something in about the Arbitrum airdrop approach?
100%. Go ahead.
Yeah, what I would definitely say is, like, in my opinion at least, Arbitrum did not like maximize their airdrop opportunity. I think if you look to like Optimism, they did a little bit better job at this. I don't think that like looking at Arbitrum though is necessarily the best example, because I think a lot of other stuff is going to get pulled in and considered for future L2 airdrops. So if you're only like transacting on chain and bridging stuff into wallets, you're probably not going to get as high of an airdrop allocation as you would have on an Arbitrum drop.
Interesting. Okay, so are you still speaking? Because you're still on mute. Okay. Okay, great. So this actually illustrates another great point that, when it comes to looking at data and doing analysis, there might be different perspectives on the same problem. And that's fair. That's why we see not one dashboard on, these protocols that are doing an airdrop, but like multiple. Great. All right. I think we covered we covered everything that we wanted to cover. We touched on most of it. But before we wrap up, like we only have an hour. There obviously we could probably talk for an hour or two or three more. But we want to keep it a bit focused. But that being said, if people are tuning into this to the space or listening back to it, and they want to know more, they found this interesting, where could they go if they want to find out more about what you're doing? So to learn more about today's topics and specifically what you've told the people here, where should they go? Want to hear dashboards, newsletters, accounts, you name it.
I think I can start first. So for anyone who are interested in the data side, feel free to check out Dune and search 21 Shares. We are one of the top teams on there. And search about zkEVM, and you will find the necessary data you want to understand on zkSync era and Polygon zkEVM. And for more written type of research, feel free to subscribe for our newsletter on 21shares.com. And we have different types of contents. We have quarterly reports, we We have weekly newsletter and monthly report. Feel free to subscribe. And thank you for having me once again.
Yeah, I guess second to get introduced, I'll follow up there. Bankless.com is our newsletter. Sign up and subscribe. We have a free newsletter that gets sent out 5 days a week. We also have a premium paid tier, and you unlock the airdrop guide, which has over 60 protocols, not just zkSync, but every L2, every network, any kind of DApp, everything, a lot of different kinds of tokenless protocols. So if you're interested in airdrops, I definitely recommend checking out the airdrop guide. You get like 5 free examples. We send a couple out every month. That's pretty cool. You also get Token Hub. We have some like analyst thoughts on some popular and hot tokens. But yeah, thank you for having me in the space. Really enjoyed it, and appreciated talking to everyone here. Great talking to y'all. So thank you.
Thank you for being here, Jack. It's awesome to have you. Here's to many times more. Louis, please let us know where they can find more of your and 6 Degree Labs work.
Yeah, sure. Feel free to find us on Dune or just visit our newly launched website, 60degree.xyz. Thanks for having me, Alex. Thanks everybody here.
Thank you for being here. If you were listening to the space and enjoying it, definitely give these guys a follow. So that's Tom Wong from 21 Shares, Louis Wang from 6 Degree Labs, and Jack Inabinet from Bankless. Great guys. Been following them for a while and collaborating with some of them for a while as well. Always lots of great insights, as you've noticed today. So give them a follow. Yeah, also, we're back next week for our next session. Same time, same place. So look out for the announcement on my Twitter or MetricsDAO's Twitter. MetricsDAO is the host of today's space. It's a community of Web3 data analysts where you can learn, earn, and connect. So be sure to follow them if you want to find out more. And these spaces are organized and moderated by me, Helix, and I focus on driving useful insights drawn from data and research. By working with top analysts, researchers, and experts, we decipher numbers and stories to help you arrive at measured perspectives. So if you value well-founded takes and are keen on taking a data-driven approach, be sure to follow me. With these spaces and more, we're bringing clarity to complexity, one conversation at a time. Thank you for being here. See you next time.